There is a direct connection between good nutrition and performance, whether it's physical or academic. In Baltimore, I created a universal free breakfast program there, and I was only serving 8,500 meals a day, and that's pretty dismal. So taking the lead of industry, I thought, well, you know what? I am going to do some things differently. And as a chef, I cook out of the pantry. And I open the doors of my pantry. And in my pantry, I have birds. I have ravens and I have orioles in my pantry. So I went to the Baltimore Ravens and the Baltimore Orioles and I said, look, help me to serve breakfast in my schools. So I created this little breakfast box, right? Kind of a simple concept. You take the lowest sugar cereal on the market, 100% juice and a whole grain snack, and packaged it up in a neat little package, and I put like a secret prize in 1 in 20 of these boxes. Because I also grew up in a generation where I secretly lusted after the hall monitor's sash. It was like this outward sign of respect and nobility that I didn't have, right? And we have this expectation that our kids are going to be like these great citizens, but we don't give them citizenship skills. And quite honestly, my lunch staff didn't want to do breakfast, right? It's not our job. It's not on our contract. So I took the oldest group of kids in each school and made them the breakfast monitors, right? And their job was to bring breakfast into the classroom. So 1 in 20 of these has the secret code. So one kid in every class, every day, won something. And the Ravens and the Orioles were really generous about donating hats and jerseys and tickets and, you know, whatever swag I could hustle, you know? It was very Pavlovian in the approach. The kids were tearing open the boxes to get to the prizes, but eventually they started eating the contents of the boxes. And we went from serving 8,500 breakfasts a day to 40,000 breakfasts a day in 60 days. You know, it's since leveled out at about 35,000, but it works, all right? The method works. And the other thing that happened that was really surprising was the little kids could not wait to be older kids to run the breakfast program. Crazy stuff, right? So I also know as a chef and a food service director and a food educator that if you give a kid a seed and let a kid put the seed in the ground and watch it grow into something that then they can harvest, that they can cook, that they can share with their peers, and that they can taste, it forever changes the way they look at food. It's no longer consumption, all right? There are all of these other lessons that are built into that. And it's a moment that's pretty profound. To see a kid walk down a row of cherry tomatoes that he or she planted and to pluck one off the vine, still warm from the summer sun, and you plop that in your mouth and that flavor explodes, that is a moment you cannot teach in a book. That is a moment that every child should experience in their lives. Great Kids Farm began on the site of an abandoned orphanage. It was founded by a slave, this man, Reverend George Bragg. And he got that even though the Emancipation Proclamation had been proclaimed, that there would be no freedom for his people until he had economic freedom, which meant jobs, careers, and opportunity. So he formed this place to do exactly that. They started off with like, you know, agro sort of training, and it made a lot of sense at the time. And it went through several incantations in its life. It was given to the Archdiocese, the Episcopal Archdiocese of Baltimore, and then in 1953 it was given to the city of Baltimore with the same sort of promise that it was going to be this place where kids would learn jobs and training, but it was like pre-integration. So they were in this crazy space where, well, it can't just be for black kids, and I don't know about the white kids, so let's just not make it for any kids, right? And then it became this place where the groundskeepers ran this place, and they grew office plants for city office buildings. And Baltimore City had been wooing me for several years to come and work in their program. I had been very successful around the country doing this. And I talked about my success with greenhouses and how that really is a great teaching tool to teach kids math and science and language and art and music and all the things that you're supposed to teach in school. The then COO said, well, here's the address, go out and check it out. So I go out there, and it's not just greenhouses, it's this amazing farm. So I came back and I said, look, you guys have this diamond in the rough here. Why are you about to sell it to some used car guys, you know? Well, we need the money. And I said, well, you know, this is a better tool for education than it is as, you know, as a, you know, budget line item. So through some wrangling, we got it tied up, and Dr. Alonso, you saw him there. He was the former chief of staff for the New York City public school system, a friend of mine. I'd done some consulting work for him, and he was the new CEO of Baltimore, and he invited me down. I you know, presented my business plan and my pitch, and all of the suits are in the room going, well, it'll never work. You know, the bureaucracy will tear it apart. It's just not going to work. And I heard Alonso mumble under his breath, then I will kill the bureaucracy, all right? I went back to New Hampshire. I get this cryptic email on Christmas Eve, and I open it up, and it's a link to the Baltimore Sun, and the headline is, Dr. Alonso fires 350 bureaucrats at central office, with just this little line at the bottom that says, do you still want the job? So, absolutely, right? So I came to Baltimore. So, you know, as you can see, our little farm, that little patch of green there, is like in the heart of Babylon, right? It's surrounded by strip malls and fast food joints and stuff, but it is really making an impact. Now, he gave me this farm, but he didn't give me any money or funding or anything else. He said, you will figure it out, you know? So I've been figuring it out. So as an entrepreneur, I knew that I needed to figure out economic models to support it, you know? I also believe in self-supporting systems, right? I do not believe in the Blanche Dubois theory of business, relying upon the kindness of strangers, you know? I think that you need to create your own wealth, right? So I'm a chef, and I know many of my other chef buddies like good food. So I went to my chef friends and said, what if we started growing stuff for you? What if we started doing contract cropping with, you know, fancy microgreen blends and, you know, organic chicken, eggs, and like all of these other things? And they said, absolutely, Tony, we'll support you. So that then became a revenue stream. Then we started a CSA. Then we started a farmer's market. And all of the things that we grow out there, our kids, you know, grow, we produce, we sell. I want to teach them this vertically integrated business model of you plant it, you grow it, you harvest it, you sell it, you cook it, you reap the benefits, and we continue on. So that's sort of the process of the farm there. I started doing other things like, well, what about goats? You know, I don't want to use pesticides to clear the fields. I'll bring in goats. So people were crazy over the goats, right? It was as though I brought in a herd of unicorn to Baltimore because people had never seen goats. So, and we were really mindful to put the goats away at night so they didn't become curry in the morning, you know? So, but the goats sort of cleared the fields, aerated, fertilized. They did it all without a coffee break or a union grievance, right? And it really worked for us, right? So we thought chickens and then bees. Look, I couldn't afford to buy chickens, so we got eggs and we hatched our own chickens, you know? And now we have a flock of, you know, over 50 chickens that produce eggs for us every day. And it's amazing when you bring a kid out and they're face to face with nature. You know, children that have never had this opportunity before, it transforms them. The two gentlemen on the bottom right down there, James and Marcus, these two kids, Tim and Marcus, I'm sorry. These guys were hardcore thugs, you know, when they came out to the farm for the first time. And they came out to the farm under duress, right? I ain't going to no farm. I don't need to see no chickens, you know? And it was like, well, your probation officer said you did, all right? So, you know. But something happened. A moment changed the way they looked at things, and they got it. And they went back to their neighborhoods, and they started creating gardens in their own neighborhood, and they started connecting with adults in that neighborhood. And we got them a little job out at the farm to come out to the farm with a stipend so that they were doing farm tours, and they were running the place. And they are our leaders, you know, that sort of are part of the transformation. I got a grant last summer for 50 kids that were aging out of foster care, right? So the stats in Baltimore are 75% of the children that age out of foster care are either incarcerated or homeless in the first jail, or in the first year that the safety net is pulled away. That's pretty dismal stuff. So I got this grant to bring 50 kids out to the farm so they could learn agro-hospitality as an industry. I wanted to teach them how to build hoop houses, which are portable greenhouses, right? That could then grow food for the school district. I am the biggest purchaser in the area. I have a $40 million a year food business. And I wrote this RFP calling for only Maryland-grown produce, right? Because I also believe that it's your taxpayer dollars. Why are you building expressways to send your money out of the state? You should be actively building off-ramps to collect that money, right? And local produce and local purchasing is a way to facilitate that, and it's really simple, right? So these kids, we had an interview process. We had this whole, in this hallway at this high school, I had 250 kids show up with borrowed shirts and ties that wanted to impress me, to get this job, to get a chance to come out to this farm and work their butts off in the summer. And what I heard from these kids were, because I don't want to die, because I don't want to stay here, I don't want to get shot, you know, I want to do something better. So it's about opportunity, and it's about facilitating opportunity and making that happen, that you start radical change.